Hey, welcome back to Afternoon Garage. So just looking at the oil pump here, and well, it's about time to do the valve train. So we're going to do three things to the valve train today. Number one being we're going to replace the valve seals. Number two, we're going to install rocker shaft seals, which it doesn't have any. And number three, we're going to be doing a valve adjustment. And then maybe next week, we're going to be able to put the covers back on these things, flip this around, get this thing assembled, and at least back on the lift so I can get it back in the car. So the first thing I need to do is take the rockers out and, well, get those valve springs out. So I have some ideas on getting those valve springs out. Let's go to the bench and show you what I came up with. So typically, I work on a lot of GM cars, and this is usually what we use. And it's a valve spring compressor. Tighten this down, it kind of collapses the spring, and you take the locks out, take the retainer off, pull the seal out, drive a new one in. So this is great if you have an exposed valve spring, but in this case, it's deep inside of a well, so that's not going to work here. So what I made was I made something like this. So I took a regular screwdriver, welded a nut on there, and what I want to try to do is use a normal kit, and something like this out of this kit. This kit is something that you would typically use when the head's off, and you can actually get on both sides of the valve and kind of clamp it closed. Take the spring off that way. But I think what I want to do is I'm going to try something like pushing, maybe bolt this to the head and then push that valve spring down, see if I can't get the keepers off. Another thing I have is something I made here. So basically I just took a compression gauge and has NPT fitting on the end and mated it with an air compressor fitting. So put 100 psi in this, pushes the valves up, and then you can compress the spring and get the locks out. Alright, you may be able to see I've been in here already. You can see I got a plug in here in this end, keep the water out, and I put this rocker shaft in there, and we'll pop that out and take a look at the valve. Okay, this is the number 6 rocker. Another thing you don't want to do is you don't want to get any of these mixed up. So all your rocker shafts and the rockers need to go right back in where they came out, of course. Okay, now what you have here is you have a valve spring, a valve retainer here, and then you have some locks inside of there. There's two pieces, kind of go together. Now my thought here is to take this tool that I made here, if you want to call it that, and then bolt this to the head. And put that in there like that, and then use downward pressure and push down, and it exposes the locks. So you can get in there to get that out. Well, problem is you have to have constant force on this thing. I was actually able to take the locks out, take the retainer off, the spring out, get the valve seal out of this one. Let's go back to the bench and take a look at it. So there's a new set of valve seals. They're also Victor. It also comes with the front main seals. Typically they give you that as well. So your valve seal kind of looks like this. They're metal. They have kind of a rubber inside of here. They have rubber on the outside. And they simply just, they kind of have some serrations in there, and you just kind of press them in there. So here's the one I took out. So this is what I typically see on American cars. It's kind of funny that this is a German vehicle. You'd think they'd use something special on there. And what it is, it's just kind of a hard plastic thing, and it's wound with steel, like a spring. It's kind of interesting how this works, but what happens is your valve, your valve guides are in here, and your valve goes up and down, and a little residual amount of oil comes out, and well, it kind of seeps past this plastic here. Since this is hard plastic, it's really not going to give like these rubber ones do. You can see. There's quite a bit of give there, and also your sealing capability is pretty good. It uses a seal something very similar to what you'd find on the front main seal here. It's got a little ridge inside of there. Keeps all the oil inside of there. So here's what I came up with. These are commercially available. So there's 2 different ones. There's one for the intake that I've marked I. One here for the exhaust. And you can see they're just slightly different. I don't know, this one's just a little bit longer. So the exhaust one is longer by, boy, it doesn't look like much. Maybe 5 or 6 millimeters or something like that. But regardless, you know, purchasing both of these tools is hundreds of dollars. I really didn't want to have to do this. But, you know, with a precision job like this is, you really don't want to be messing around with the valves and, you know, try to, you know, damage anything, especially with this when you're trying to get it off. Another thing I kind of came up with here too is I think I'm going to take a Dremel, and you can see the teeth on that in there, and I think I'm going to take a Dremel and put some more pronounced teeth on it so I can actually grab at this. You can see that metal spring in there, and so it would kind of grab that spring a little better. See, because really all it really wants to do is kind of slip off there. When you got it out, you know, you're not using this tool anymore, so it's just going to be for a removal. And yeah, well, let's go back and see if this makes my life any easier. And one more thing to mention here. This is that rocker out of number 6. You know, you have this rocker pivot here, rocker shaft, whatever you want to call it. And you see it's got these 2 grooves in there. This is really kind of how it comes. So it's got an Allen on one side, and then you loosen this on this side, and it kind of, you know, kind of mushrooms out the metal there, and that's how it seals. So, you know, you could see that after some time, that may not seal so well, and in fact, you can see some dark spots in here where the oil has traveled. What happens is, of course, the oil collects down there, and that's no damn good either. So what they've created is they've made some rocker shaft seals. There's your part number right there. It's kind of like an O-ring, and what it does basically is it just kind of slides in here. Slides in that groove right there. So this will help control that quite a bit. So we'll be putting these in as we go. I think what I'm going to do is I'm going to probably take the furthest one out and then kind of move backwards, do the intake, then the exhaust, and the intake and the exhaust. So this is quite a few of these things. There's 24 of these to install. And another thing is you definitely don't want to be taking your valve spring off when you have pressure from the cam. So you want to make sure your crankshaft is rotated in the right position before you go and try to pop these shafts out. And boy, that's a lot to remember, but see if we can make it happen. Okay, I've been looking at this engine, trying to find the best way to, you know, take it apart and do each cylinder probably at a time, because what has to happen here is the intake and exhaust valves, of course, have to be closed. You know, you put the air in there, you know, take the pressure off the rockers, and then it keeps the valves closed, and we can get those valve springs compressed and get the locks out of there. So I'm probably going to start at this end and, you know, do number 4, then number 5, and then number 6, kind of putting it back together as I go along, and then flip the motor over, and then do 1, 2, 3 in the same way. before it'll get hard. Well, you can see it looks nice and seated. These locks look pretty good in there. So yeah, 10 more times and we'll have it done. This is very time consuming. This is probably going to take me about 4 or 5 hours. Alright, now that took me like 5 minutes. Definitely getting better at this. Yeah, I'm having a hard time getting places like this. So in this case, one of those cases where I pull the stud out. There we go. Now I can get all the way back in here. Alright, that cleaned up pretty well. Got all the gasket surfaces nice and flat. Took all the gasket material off. Only had to remove one stud, as you can see, and these are pretty much ready to go now. So they're a little bit porous here, and I was going to use some silicone, but you know what? I don't think I'm going to put anything like that on there. Just put them on dry. Should be ready to go. Let's put those rockers back in. So this is what I set up beforehand for my parts to make sure I wouldn't get them swapped around. Intake 654, exhaust here, and then also these arrows designate where the actual screw you need to loosen is, because there's a, you know, that screw that kind of mushrooms there. So want to make sure and put them back in where they came out. And then of course I put the valve seals that came out of those cylinders. Some of these look really baked. That one not too bad. Actually, I mic'd this one. This one's pretty good. This one's way out. So obviously, you know, they've probably been leaking. And then that one there, where the valve seal actually was walking off the seat there. So, you know, this spring kind of is supposed to hold it in there, but you can see Well, it didn't do a very good job, you know, because I pulled it that way. So, yeah, that was probably leaking tons of oil. So, we'll start out with number 4. Put the rocker shaft seals on. Probably just want to clean them up with some brake cleaner really quick, and then use some, use some lube, some assembly lube, some kind. Okay, these are not the easiest to get on there, so I'm just gonna put them over like that, and come in here with a little awl, a little pick, kind of get underneath it, and get it past that groove. And then just kind of roll it right up into the hole there. There we go. Just like that. Not too bad. To the other side. Okay, got it down there. And it won't go past the groove there. Also make sure not to damage the O-ring. Kind of pull it downwards a little bit. And it'll fall right in the hole. Boom, just like that. No problem. Now we can go pair it up with this, get the right orientation, which is this. Put lots of lube in there and yeah, go pound this thing in. Right, and one thing to notice, you have like a big boss and a small boss. So what you want to do is have the rocker shafts flush with the smaller boss. So then in that case, that'd be this one here, and that one there. It's much different for the intake, but just pay attention to your thicknesses here and get it flush with the smaller one, and you'll be all set to go. And last but not least, boy, that took a lot longer than expected. 25 minutes in, and really not going to be able to get to the valve adjustment, but we did do the valve seals and the rocker shaft seals. Overall, I'm really happy about how this turned out. You know, those valve seals were way down inside of there. Really wasn't a big deal with that valve seal puller tool that I had. And once again, I did have to take a Dremel and cut some grooves into that thing to be able to grab onto those and get those valve seals out of there. But I'm sure it's going to pay off for me when I get this engine started. And there's a lot less smoke than there was. One thing I was really disappointed at when I first started this project, that I had to buy almost $400 worth of tools just to compress the valve springs. So what I was going to do was, purchase both of them and then kind of see if there was a difference in either of them to maybe, I don't know, combine this tool into one. And actually there's a real simple way to do that. And you can see that this is the one for the exhaust and it's slightly longer than the one for the intake. Other than that, they're really identical. The part that presses down on the valve spring here is identical. The length on here is identical. So really I believe that all you would really have to do is just take some round stock and just kind of weld it to the other mount here. Buy the intake one, shorten it up by about 5-6 millimeters. Man, this could be all integrated into one tool. $400 is a lot for 2 tools. However, it was worth it since I got the job done safely. Another thing I want to talk about is those rocker shaft seals. Very skeptical those are actually going to do anything at all because the actual seal is held inside of an area where there's no oil flowing. Now some oil can flow past the rockers into that area, but if it gets into the area where it's mechanically fastened to the block, really don't see how that's going to help control your oil flow. So if I had it to do all over again, I'd probably do them, but I really don't think they're going to help your oil control problem very much. Another thing I want to talk about is the importance of adjusting valves on an engine like this. Now we didn't have time to get to the valve adjustment. We'll do that next week. But as I said before, there's really no valve clearance in here, and I'm really kind of worried about that because really need to maintain some small amount of valve clearance to ensure that the rockers aren't pushing on the valves all the time. But we'll see what that is next week. And hey, if you like content like this, please subscribe. Thanks for watching.